You'll see those frown-faced fellows there, and they're kind of skeptical. Also, we could have titled the message "Jesus Dealing with the Cynics," but skeptics really fit the title a little bit better. Have you ever asked any really tough questions? Well, I get tough questions quite a bit, and some of them I have to say, well, I don't know about that. Let me get back with you. A while back, there was a comedian by the name of George Carlin, and he asked some tough questions. Now, I'll just give you three of them. He said, if the black box flight recorder is never damaged during a plane crash, then why isn't the whole airplane built out of that? And he asked, why is there an expiration date on sour cream? If a man is standing in the middle of the forest speaking, and there is no woman around to hear him, is he still wrong? Now, the questions thrown at Jesus were much tougher and very cleverly thought out. The guys that Jesus was constantly up against, they were some pretty tough cookies. They were what we might call the religious elite. For the most part, they were a group of religious intellectuals that were always questioning every move that Jesus made. It seemed every time he did something good, this elite, intellectually superior group of religious leaders called it into question. And don't we sort of see something like that today on the political landscape? When President Obama was in office, a lot of people called everything he did into question. Now that President Trump is in office, there are those that call everything that he does into question. He could cross the road, and they'd probably call it into question. But these folks, they never had a good word to say about someone who was giving sight to the blind, casting out demons, helping the lame to walk, and feeding those who were hungry. In their close encounters with Jesus, we're looking at today, we find that they have several questions that they want to ask him. They were tough questions. And they thought these questions would trip him up. And they had one purpose in mind. They wanted to discredit Jesus. They wanted to get him in hot water with the authorities. They really would like to see him killed. That don't speak very well of their hearts, does it? They pulled together some of their best thinkers, and they asked him a series of questions in an effort to discredit his ministry in one of two ways: either lower the opinion that the people had of him, or to get him in trouble with the Roman authorities. And it shows the hatred of Jesus by those who had the most to lose. And you'll find that very same thing played out in our culture today. Those who have the most to lose in how they want to live their lifestyle will hate Jesus, because Jesus brings condemnation to them. They don't like the light. They'd rather live in the darkness. So they hate anything that has to do with Jesus, which means Christians and churches. Well, questioning Jesus' authority. That's the first one we're going to look at this morning. One day, the religious leaders demanded to know by what authority Jesus did the healings and the teachings that he gave. He had just thrown a bunch of price gouging merchants out of the temple. They were robbing people in the name of God, and most likely giving a kickback to those very religious leaders that were coming against Jesus. And this is what they said in the book of Luke. They demanded, by what authority are you doing all these things? Who gave you the right? In other words, just who do you think you are? Who gave you the right to determine what will or will not go on in the house of God? Now, you have to kind of admire the level of self-control here. I mean, this is God in the flesh, the one for whom the temple was built, the one that is to be worshipped. And these religious leaders, they have the blatant audacity to call his authority into question. I don't know about you, but if I were him, I would have pointed my fingers at him and had lightning bolts, come out of my fingers and turned them into crispy critters. That's one reason why I'll never be accused of being Jesus. And probably you'll never be accused of being Jesus either. Let's look at how Jesus responds to him. He says, let me ask you a question first, he replied. Did John's authority to baptize come from heaven, or was it merely human? Well, they talked it over among themselves. Now, if we say it was from heaven, he will ask why we didn't believe John. But if we say it was merely human, the people will stone it because they are convinced that John was a prophet. So they finally replied that they didn't know. And Jesus responded, then I won't tell you by what authority I do these things. Do you notice the fact that these guys are not concerned with the truth? They're not concerned with the facts. Instead, they concentrate on the effects of the question. I find that interesting. And that's how skeptics are. They're not really concerned about the facts. They have to find a way to answer the question. What kind of effect is this answer to his question going to have? Do you ever find yourself reading the Bible or listening to a message with a desire to find the loopholes? Or do you do it to have God speak to you and change your heart? Now, the religious leaders, they never deny that John's baptism is from heaven. But they can't bring themselves to confirm it either. They say if we say the baptism was human, we will be stoned by the people whose lives have been changed. If we say the baptism was of God, then Jesus will ask us why we haven't accepted it. So they simply plead the fifth. Anytime you hear somebody plead the fifth, you know they're guilty of something. I plead the fifth. Now, from reading this, we get the impression that Jesus doesn't give them an answer. But his answer is found in the challenge he gives concerning John the Baptist. And the answer is, I speak for heaven. And what Jesus is saying is this: my authority comes from the same place John's baptism comes from. And it's up to you to make up your minds concerning it. He lays this whole thing in their laps. They need to make a decision one way or the other. Does Jesus have the authority of heaven on his side, or is he simply a man like any other man? In his answer, we find ourselves faced with the same dilemma as these religious leaders. And the challenge is this, and we need to ask ourselves this morning. If you're here, you need to ask yourself this question. Do you accept the authority of Jesus Christ in your life? Or you just simply view his teaching as nice thoughts to comfort you when things are kind of bad? In other words, Grandma Sally has passed away, or Uncle Henry has died, and we find the words of Jesus very comforting on this gloomy day. Or do you really accept Jesus Christ as the authority in your life? And that's the fundamental question that each of us must answer on a personal level. You, right where you're sitting, you need to answer that question. Is Jesus Lord of your life? He either is or he's not. There's no standing in the middle here. There's no straddling the fence, as they say. Either we live for him or we live against him. One place, it was even remarked a little bit closer than that. You're either a child of God or you're a child of the devil. That's an ouchy one, isn't it? None of us want to be a child of the devil. But we need to make that decision for ourselves. And the decision that we make will determine not only our eternal destiny, but how we live our lives in the here and now. They also was questioning Jesus' integrity. If we can get people to doubt someone's integrity, we've really put a big wedge in there, haven't we? Well, I don't know if they've done it or not, but this was said about them, and I don't know. A police officer pulled a man over for speeding, and he had this following exchange back and forth. The officer said, "May I see your driver's license?" The driver said, "I don't have one. It was suspended when I got my 5th DUI. The officer said, "May I see the owner's registration for this vehicle?" "It's not my car. I stole it." "The car stolen?" That's right, but come to think of it, I believe I saw the owner's registration in the glove box when I was putting my gun there. There's a gun in the glove box? Yes, sir. That's where I put it after I shot and killed the woman who owns this car, and I stuffed her body in the trunk. There's a body in the trunk? Yes, sir. Hearing this, the officer immediately called his captain, and the car was quickly surrounded by police, and the captain approached the driver. Sir, can I see your license? Sure, here it is. It was valid. Captain said, whose car is this? It's mine, officer. Here's the registration. Well, could you slowly open your glove box so I can see if there's a gun in it? Yes, sir, but there's no gun there. Sure enough, there was nothing in the glove box. Would you mind opening your trunk? I was told there's a body in it. No problem. The trunk was opened, no body. The captain said, I don't understand it. The officer who stopped you said you told him you didn't have a license, that you stole the car, you had a gun in the box, and there was a dead body in the trunk. Yeah, I'll bet you he told you I was speeding too. It would appear that the driver was trying to have the policeman's integrity called into question. Well, these religious leaders are doing something real similar with Jesus. They think if they set him up with a question with no easy answer, then he'll have to compromise his integrity to find a solution. In fact, it was a question that had been debated among the crowd for years. Watching for their opportunity, the leaders sent spies. This is what Christ said here in the book of Luke. Watching for their opportunity, the leaders sent spies pretending to be honest men. They tried to get Jesus to say something that could be reported to the Roman governor so he would arrest Jesus. Teacher, they said, we know that you speak and teach what is right and are not influenced by what others think. You teach the way of God truthfully. Now tell us, is it right for us to pay taxes to Caesar or not? So here we find these guys trying to pull off and try plan B. They take their deception to a new level. Using secret agents pretending to be honest men, they try to get Jesus in hot water with the government. In effect, they want the Jerusalem IRS hot on his trail. So he takes a simple Roman coin in his hand, and he gives them an answer. He says, I honor God in every way. That statement alone, ask yourself that question as we move through this morning. Do you honor God in every way? In the book of Luke, Jesus saw through their trickery and said, show me a Roman coin whose picture and title are stamped on it. Caesar's, they replied. Well then, he said, give to Caesar what belongs to Caesar, and give to God what belongs to God. So they failed to trap him by what he said in front of the people. Instead, they were amazed by his answer, and they became silent. Jesus honors God by being a good citizen of heaven and earth. And I think there's a lot we can learn from this passage about citizenship, about paying our taxes and that sort of thing. But the point is that Jesus was a person of integrity in every way. A lot of folks, they like to kind of change the wording when it comes to taxes. They say, I don't cheat on my taxes. But I'm very creative when it comes to my financial means. And we can be very creative in our trying to get through loopholes. But through your creativeness, does that take away your integrity? Jesus was a person of integrity in every way. The religious leaders, they thought they had Jesus stumped on this one. But Jesus gives a simple, logical, God-honoring answer that completely kind of blows them right out of the water. Now, the problem here is that the religious leaders were silenced. You might say, well, that's a good thing. Well, the problem is their hearts wasn't changed. So we can be silenced without our hearts being changed. They'll just wait for another opportunity. And this is the problem that we often run into with those that are skeptics. They come with lots of questions, and sometimes very good questions, unlike the ones used in the text to trick Jesus. And they are given satisfactory answers, but their hearts often remain unchanged. Folks want proof of the resurrection, and you give it to them, and they want proof that the Bible is inspired by God, and it's given to them. They want proof that God answers prayer and does miraculous things, and it's given to them. But so often, no matter what questions are answered or what proof is given, people will walk away from the relationship that could be theirs in Christ. And I wonder sometimes if even those of us who are called Christ followers still retain a little bit of skepticism in our hearts and in our walk. And the reason I wonder is because we who are Christians, we've been taught the truth, we've seen prayers answered, and we've believed the testimony of Jesus Christ, and we've trusted Him for our salvation. But sometimes still do not have the faith to believe that He can do great things, extraordinary things, through simple and ordinary people. So we just don't wade into it. We say, I don't believe God can do that. We need to be careful. We need to watch our step. No. God says, take the step. If there's a raging flood out there, I'll pull the waters back and you'll go across on dry ground. He wants a group of people that says, aye, aye, Captain, I'll go, send me. Only you and I can answer that question for ourselves if we have the faith to believe that God can do great things through us. And you know why He does great things through us? One purpose and one purpose only, that's to build His kingdom. To build His kingdom. The third question, they're questioning Jesus' theology. You'd think that these religious leaders were done, but there's another group of religious leaders called the Sadducees. We just talked these questions that had been coming to him, had been coming from the Pharisees. The Sadducees, they didn't believe in the literal resurrection from the dead. And they decided it's time for them to wade into the debate. So they posed this question. Teacher, don't you love their honey dripping way they go into this? Teacher, it's like saying, Rabbi, good master. Teacher, Moses gave us a law that if a man dies, leaving a wife but no children, his brother should marry the widow and have a child who will carry on the brother's name. Well, suppose there were 7 brothers. The oldest one married and then died without children. So the second brother married the widow, but he also died. Then the third brother married her, and this continued with all 7 of them who died without children. Finally, the woman also died. So tell us, whose wife will she be in the resurrection? For all 7 were married to her. I would love to somehow been a thought within the cranium of Jesus when that question was coming. Just his mind, what he was thinking. And he knew he had the answer. These folks aren't the only people confused about the whole issue of marriage and its role in heaven. There was this couple on the way to the justice of the peace to get married. They had a fatal car accident prior to them getting married. And the couple was sitting outside Heaven's Gate waiting on St. Pete to do the paperwork so they could enter in. While waiting, they wondered whether they could get married in heaven. Finally, St. Pete said, let me go check this out. That's never been asked here before. I really don't know. I'll go find out. So he left. The couple sat there for a couple of months, and they began to wonder if they got married in heaven, and it's going to be for eternity, well, what if it didn't work out? Will we be stuck with each other forever? So St. Pete returned after another month, looking bedraggled. Yes, he informed the couple, you can get married in heaven. Great, they said. But what if things don't work out? Could we also get a divorce in heaven? St. Peter, red-faced, slammed his clipboard to the ground, said, for crying out loud, it took me 3 months to find a preacher. Do you have any idea how long it's going to take to find a lawyer? Now, that's as ridiculous almost as this question they posed to him. I mean, if a woman marries and then there's 7 brothers, they all die, whose wife will she be? I mean, it was just a crazy question. The Sadducees gave Jesus a ridiculous hypothetical question to try to trap him. They thought if they could make him stumble on a theological point, it would prove to everyone that he was not from God. But of course, Jesus again comes back with an answer. It's almost as if he says, I have it all under control. I have it all under control. In so many words, Jesus said, no worries, guys. I can handle this. Jesus replied, marriage is for people here on earth. This is the New Living Translation. Marriage is for people here on earth, but in the age to come, those worthy of being raised from the dead will neither marry nor be given in marriage, and they will never die again. In this respect, they will be like angels. They are children of God and children of the resurrection. But now, as to whether the dead will be raised, even Moses proved this when he wrote about the burning bush. That was their main point. They didn't believe in the resurrection. Long after Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob had died, he referred to the Lord as the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. So he is the God of the living, not the dead, for they are all alive to him. Now, Jesus is saying here that life in heaven is significantly different than anything on earth. Human relationships, and you have to get this, it's one you got to kind of wrap your mind around. Human relationships are a matter of place and time. There's a reason for the relationships that we have. Marriage is necessary, and it's a necessary feature of life that has to do with place and time. To preserve the human race that has a cycle of life and death in heaven, we cannot die. So we have this thing put in place. We have marriage, we have offspring, and the human race continues because our relationships on earth is a matter of place and time. But in heaven, we cannot die. In heaven, there'll be no time. Yet we will have a very special relationship. And I contend, and I believe, and I think the Bible backs it up, that our relationships will be deeper, will be more fuller than anything we could ever experience or anything we could ever imagine to experience on planet Earth. Jesus assured the religious skeptics, and I think that Jesus assures you and I that he has everything under control. We look at things with human perspectives, and in my way of thinking, I always wanted Marcia to be my Marcia. And when I get to heaven, she's still going to be my Marcia, my wife. And we're going to have a mansion, and we're going to have a king-size bed, and probably an 80-inch TV, and, I don't know. But, we think those things, don't we? And when Christ says something like, no, we don't. But when we hear Christ say, there'll be no marriage, you're given in marriage, and he's really telling us, trust me, I've got this under control. You're going to have a relationship with the wife that you have and with the husband that you have, with your friends, that is going to surpass anything you could ever imagine that you've enjoyed here on earth. And we have to trust him that he has that under control. And I think as we get older, we sense that a little bit more than when we're younger. Because when we're younger, we kind of think of the hot side of love, the passion. I can't do that there, But when we get older, we think of the intimate part of love. That is very special, and we don't have to go there to have that intimate feeling that we never had as much when we were younger. And I'm just telling you that we're evolving in our relationships with one another, and heaven will be the pinnacle. And it'll be like, wow, I never enjoyed anything like this on earth. Honey, I love you now more than I ever have before. And Christ is just saying, I've got this one. It's handled. Trust me, it'll be okay. Amen. It'll be okay. He may even have the answer to the question about the man in the woods. Is he still wrong? You know, he may have that answer for you. Well, in the book of Luke, the Pharisees, I'm sure it was the Pharisees that spoke up because they were both there. They said, well said, teacher. The Pharisees, they believed in the resurrection. The Sadducees did not. Well said, teacher, remarked some of the teachers of religious law who were standing there. And then no one dared to ask him any more questions. Like, obviously, this guy was the pro-resurrection crowd. Attaboy, Jesus, you the man, you know, you answered him. But in conclusion this morning, whether it was integrity, whether it was authority issues, or the plausibility of the resurrection, Jesus had the answers to those who brought the questions. As a matter of fact, when he was only 12 years old, he left the religious teachers flabbergasted with his knowledge and questions that he was able to answer, and questions that he asked them. Never have we heard a man speak like this man. So in closing, I have a question for you today. Several there, actually. Where are you in this story? Where are you as far as, are you skeptical? Are you cynical of the things of God, of Jesus Christ, of his plan for your eternity? Are you kind of a skeptic with that? Do you have questions? And it really is okay to have them. It's nothing wrong with asking questions. Jesus wants you to ask questions. If you have a question for a minister, a preacher, put him on the spot. Ask him the question. And hopefully he'll be a man of God that will try his very best to answer it for you in a way that God would have him to. But as we ask our questions, we need to also challenge ourselves. Is it with the intent to disprove because of the implication belief in Jesus would have on the way you live your life? Or is it because you are really searching for the answers that will bring fulfillment to your life? So that's the thing we're challenged with. As Christ followers, we're challenged with it when he calls us out into things that we have to trust him in, because we say, how's this going to implicate the way I live? You know, if I get involved with this kind of ministry, I'm not going to have time to do this. I'm just not going to have time to kind of do some of the things I want to do. If you're not a Christian, the question is, well, if I accept Christ and I become a Christ follower, what kind of implication is that going to have on me? I really enjoy doing this. I really have a blast doing that. And I know as a Christian, I probably can't do those things. So there's an implication. Jesus wants to bring fulfillment to your life. If you come to Christ with an open heart, he'll fill it with joy and he'll fill it with satisfaction. And joy and satisfaction beyond anything that you can imagine right now. You'll have this battle in your mind, but I'm telling you, trust Christ. Trust Christ. Let go of that which a lot of times you don't see it. But if you was cast into the ocean and he had a pair of cement boots on, and you had the ability to take the boots off, you could unstrap them and they would sink to the bottom, what would you do? I mean, that's really where we're at if we don't know Jesus. You're in an ocean with a pair of cement boots on. And you might enjoy what you're doing, but sooner or later the bubbles will stop. And you'll find yourself without God for all of eternity. Where all you have to do is to reach down, unstrap those cement boots, and come back to the surface. Why do we make such a struggle with that? the implications of not accepting Christ far outweigh the implications of leaving it go so you can. So one of the two things we have to do as Christ followers and as those that don't know Jesus, it's a matter of trust. Trust that he can use you to do wonderful things, and trust to believe that he can fill you with his Son and with the Spirit. And the satisfaction you'll have will be beyond your wildest dreams. And one day, you will really be glad, more so than anything you can imagine right now, that you said, yes, Lord, and no to self. Self in the sense of being satisfied with things that we like to do that we know we shouldn't. So we're going to ask you to stand.